evening. What did we learn Thursday / last week?
Wow, we learned so much.
Well, the image part of it, like adding images and pasting those into the code.
Yeah, so we started with those image tags, the SRC. We learned a little bit about opening tags and closing tags. What else did we learn?
Learning more CSS styling. That was fun.
CSS, yeah, CSS is kind of one of those things that you learn trial by fire, right? So playing around with the numbers a little bit, playing around with your margins, playing around with that CSS box model, and then learning the little joys and intricacies of it, right? How it's font dash size and font dash family, but for some reason, unbeknownst to the entire world, it's just color, not font dash color. Why? I don't know, but it's always been that way. So always fun learning those little differences with CSS. What else did we learn?
Put in anchors and links.
Indentation.
Yes. Anchors, links, how we get linked to different pages, whether that's a page that we have built or someone else's page on the internet, being able to link between those pages, certainly something we do a lot of. What else?
Indentation and attributes.
Indentation, yes, the bane of all developers' existence, right? So the good news is we're going to do one more project just to practice with that a little bit more, get the handle of divs and understanding, what's inside this div or what's next to this div. We're going to play around with that a little bit more in this next project. And then towards the end of the week, I will be showing you guys a new tool called Prettier, and Prettier will actually fix a lot of your indentation for you and kind of move your code around so that it's easier to read. But that is a hotly contested tool, only because that indentation is super important to kind of learn on your own, right, and get comfortable with. So it's not just a matter of making your code easier to read, it's also a matter of making sure other developers can read your code and making sure that you're in the habit of, hey, before I start typing, I should make sure that my cursor is where I think it should be. But don't worry, that comes with practice. So if you're fighting with that, if you're not really understanding the indentation or what goes on a new line, that kind of comes over time. So I don't want you guys to panic on that. Anything else from last week that you guys want to touch on?
Adding content into your code.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about padding. We talked about margin. That's all part of the box model in CSS. And then we also touched on border a little bit, right? And that border is kind of what happens between your margin and your padding, and then ultimately your content, right? So we're going to actually start out class tonight by doing a review of the homework. So we're going to code out a little kind of rapid fire what the homework should look like. And that will give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions. So this is an exercise that you do not have to follow along with. We're going to go a little quickly just so we can get through everything. But I want you guys to interrupt at any point if you have questions or anything that you did in your homework assignment that you struggled with. We can definitely touch on that. But that's how we're going to start out class tonight, is reviewing the homework. I can't say that we will always review the homework, at the end of or at the beginning of every week. But this seems like a homework assignment that, you guys struggled with a little bit, which is good. A lot of you guys hit the nail right on the head. But I'm going to go through it and kind of talk through it as I'm coding it out and how I see it. And then you guys can ask any questions as they pop up. Any other questions or things that I should be aware of at the beginning of this class?
I just wanted to ask, so I went in Canvas and under W2 poll,
Yes.
it has a score of a T. But it then says 0 in it. So I didn't know what that means. What does the T mean?
That is a fantastic question that I do not have an answer to.
Same here.
Because I completed it, so.
Yeah, me too.
Give me 1 second to pull that up. There is a good chance that let me. So from my side, those haven't been graded yet. So I have no idea what the T stands for, but it basically means ungraded.
Okay,
So that means the ball's in our court. So don't worry if you see a 0 on that. Or a T. Again, don't know what the T stands for, but from the teacher side, it reports all of those as ungraded. So we will get to them and then you'll see your score. Pretty much for all of those, everyone will get a 2 on that because like there is no above and beyond. It's like you completed the poll. But I will get to grading those and then let you know.
okay, thank you.
Sorry, Canvas is sometimes an enigma. This is the second time we've used it, and there are a ton of features that we don't use, but I like, it would make sense if it was like a U for like ungraded or a P for pending, but I have no idea what the T means.
Maybe waiting for teacher?
Sure. Yeah, let's go for that. Why not? Jordan, go ahead.
Okay. First and foremost, thank you so much for the help you provided me and Patrick over the weekend. Also, I also realized last night when Ariel messaged me, I never received one of those emails for the GitHub. So I went ahead and made my own. And then when I tried to turn it into a file to upload, I'm not sure if I did it correctly. So I posted the link for it. So just when you do have a chance, if you could like after class, obviously, but if you do have a chance, just let me know. And I need to figure out if that's right or not.
Sure. Let me just.
Not the first attempt. Don't even look at the first attempt. That was not.
So Canvas should have let you just upload that file.
It kept saying cannot upload file, and then it would close or not close. It would like go back kind of like to the previous page.
Okay. Well, we can see the code. So that should be fine. For this assignment, if you continue having problems on the next assignment, let us know and we'll do a one-on-one and figure out what's going on of why you can't submit the HTML file.
Okay, I was hoping maybe if you had a chance on Thursday, if we have like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I can definitely take a look. Just remind me like at the end of class or during break, and we can definitely take a look at that. But what you submitted, we can see, so you're good to go for that assignment. I wouldn't worry about that.
Okay, thank you so much. You did the same link, right? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Alba, go ahead.
I just have a quick question about attendance.
Yes, shoot.
It says that I have like 89%.
So the TAs usually take attendance for me.
I have never missed a class, so I'm not sure why.
Let me just take a note on that. I will get back to you on that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, let me check into that and I'll let you know. Any other questions? Okay, so we're gonna dive into this homework review. Before I do that though, a couple quick things. There is a form that I added to Canvas. If you guys have already filled it out, great. If not, I believe it is labeled W3 poll in Canvas. This is tied to the funding that we get. The AEIs, the Alliance for Economic Inclusion, they are paying your way forward for this course. So if you guys don't mind filling that out for us, I know some of the information we've already captured on the application, but this should only take you guys 2 or 3 minutes to fill out. If you want to do it now, that's fine. If not, if you could do it before class on Thursday, that would be appreciated. Should be a really quick form, and that's kind of the basis of our data collection. One of our core values at Hack Upstate is being data-driven and making sure we have an impact on the community. And this form is just a data point that we use that we can kind of compare you to throughout the program. So only a couple questions, hopefully a quick thing to fill out. If any questions do pop up, feel free to shoot me a Slack message and I can look into that. Reminder, Open Hack Thursday, 6 p.m. in person at Common Space. I will send you guys the door code to that probably on Thursday so you can get in. If you have any problems, you can shoot me a Slack message. I will be accessible via Slack the whole time. We will be attending Open Hack instead of class. With that said, if you want to bring your laptop, a great thing to work on is the optional assignments from week 2. Continue working on those free CodeCamp ones, but remember the main objective there is to be social, to talk to other developers, to hear about their experience, to learn what jobs they do, to get a little bit more comfortable talking about what you're learning, what your experience has been so far, all of that stuff. So it is not, I don't want you to think about it as a night off from class. I want you guys to think about that as jump starting your socialization on your way to your career, right? Most job placements happen through networking. And so Open Hack is a great opportunity to talk to other developers. You don't need to worry about, interviewing or any of that kind of stuff. This is a social event, not necessarily a career event. But being able to talk to other people about what you do, super, super important. So that's why we are attending Open Hack on Thursday. And then finally, week 7 will be in person. So if you need to attend virtually, you can. We will have the microphone set up in the classroom so that you'll be able to hear everyone a little bit better. But Monday and Tuesday, that is November 7th and 8th, will be at Riley Hall 447. I will have a map of the Lemoyne campus posted the week before, 2 weeks before actually, because let me just pull up the schedule so you guys can see that. We are in week 3. This is the second week of HTML. You've got 2 more weeks of HTML coming your way. The good news is that there are not a ton of new concepts that we will be learning this week, week 4, or week 5. This is all about getting practice with your HTML. So if you guys are feeling behind, if you feel like you struggled with the homework assignment, this is not the time to panic, right? We are going to get more and more practice with this. Then we go into DevOps on week 6. This is with Nathan Evans and is fully virtual up until this point. All weeks up until week 6 are. And that is all about how we deploy our code, how we get our code actually live on the internet. Then the week after, that is the 7th to the 10th, those classes will be in person. So Monday and Tuesday are at Riley Hall. Wednesday and Thursday are at the computer lab at the library we were in for week 1. So if you can make those classes in person, that is strongly encouraged. Trying to give you about a month's heads up here. But if you need to be virtual, that is okay. You can join in on the Zoom classroom, and we'll have Zoom fired up so you can join that way as well. After that week, we go back to fully virtual, and we'll have that will be the first week of JavaScript. That first week is in person, and we'll be getting into that a little bit later. But just wanted to flag that for you guys of the 7th to the 10th. Those classes will be in person, either at the classroom, Riley Hall 447, or at the lab in the library on Wednesday and Thursday.
I have a question.
Shoot.
So if there are days that we know that we are not going to be able to attend either in person or virtual, who do we just not show up? Is there someone that we can tell?
Yeah, so shooting me and Jason a message in Slack is totally fine. And just give us a heads up why, and we'll mark you as excused in Canvas so it doesn't impact the attendance.
Okay.
But yeah, just shoot Jason and I a message so we just, we know what's going on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Good question. Anyone else? Okay, let's dive into that homework. So I'm going to pull up here I'm going to switch to the student view. I'm going to switch back over to the week 2 homework. I'm going to pull up this mockup, right? So first thing I'm going to do with this mockup, as always, is I'm not actually going to start with the code. I'm going to download this and I'm going to practice using this in preview. So now that I have this open, and sorry, I just saw there were a couple Slack messages. Yeah, let me grab that meetup link for, so if you go to meetup.com, of course, I'm not signed in here. Give me 1 second. I did post the link in one of the outlines, but I will definitely post it again for you guys. The reason why I want to take a minute on this is if you could RSVP to it, if you haven't already, that would be appreciated, just so Mike, the organizer, can know how many people are going to be there for like getting food ready and all of that stuff. But if you're on Meetup, you can go up to the top up here and just do a search for OpenHack and set the location to Syracuse, New York. And when you search for that, it should come up right at the top. It is not OpenHack for Fort Wayne in Indiana. I have no idea why that came up. But down here, Thursday, October 13th at 6 p.m., if you click on that, that will bring you in here. And then if you guys can RSVP to that and hit attend, if you are able to make it, I get that it's in person and not everyone will be able to. That is okay. But I just dropped the link in the Zoom chat and I will put it in Slack as well, so you guys have it. It may make you make a Meetup account. That should be completely free and you can sign in with Google, I think, if that's a little bit easier. But if you can RSVP to that, that is appreciated for Mike, just so he can know, how much food to have and stuff like that. Oh, I saw someone else posted the link.
That was me, Max. It's in there.
Why is your link different than my link? Did I post the wrong one? That's weird. There might be 2 events on Meetup. Wait, did I?
There is 2. There's one that I accidentally clicked on and it was October 18th. It's the JavaScript meetup.
But these are 2 of the same
Oh,
2
that's what you're
link
talking
IDs, and they both show. Okay, that's very odd. If you just RSVP to one, either one of them, that's fine.
I believe I RSVP'd. I am getting emails and messages.
Cool, then you're good to go. If you click on either one of the links in the Zoom chat and it says you're going to the event, you're all set and RSVP'd. I'm really confused as to why there are two of them. But I know he did have to move the date from Tuesday to Thursday. So maybe Meetup did something weird and duplicated it. That's very odd. I don't know what to tell you there, but if you RSVP to either one of them, you're good to go. Okay, so I'm going to pop open the week 2 homework and I'm going to start gridding this out, right? And this is something that's just helpful for us because we can identify kind of where our divs need to be before we start diving into the code. So I open this by just clicking on the PDF. By default, that should open it in preview. Once it's open in preview, you can hit the little the marker in the top right here. That will get you into the markup toolbar. Then we can go to our shapes, the circle and the square, and go to the rectangle there. So first things first, I'm going to move this and I'm going to identify where my different rows are. So that looks like a row. I can copy and paste that. And now I can identify there's another row here. Then I can copy and paste that down to the sponsors and pull that down. Then I can scroll down a little bit more. I've got one more row for my red numbers that are showing up there. And then finally, I go down to my footer. So based off of this, I can now say there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. Okay, so that's helpful because now that if I call a row a certain number, I can identify which row that is. Now I'm going to come back. I'm going to make a new rectangle and I'm going to change my border color. So I'm going to use this empty square here and I'm going to change it to, I don't know, let's go for red. And I can take that and start identifying, hey, one column is there, another column is over here. And we keep going on that until we identify where all of our columns are. And visually, columns are always going to be in rows, so they're always inside the green border. But sometimes being able to put that grid out there helps us identify where the size of those columns are or how many columns there actually are. So for something like this sponsors, it's actually a little tricky because we're like, well, that's one big row. But whenever it's one big row, that means it's a 12 column, right? It's just a column that happens to take up the full space. And then we come down here. Red was probably the absolute worst color choice for the columns because it's going to be hard to see. But we identify down here, hey, there are 6 columns that make all of these red boxes show up. And then finally, we have our footer down at the bottom, and that's going to be another 12. Does anyone have questions on this exercise of kind of breaking out the grid so we kind of plan visually before we dive into our code?
No, but that's awesome. I missed that somehow last week. And wow, that would have been a lot easier.
Don't worry, we will be doing this exercise again and again and again.
I hand wrote mine out like on a notepad, which I think kind of helped me with typing the code later, but I just got so frazzled. But I wish I would have did this instead.
Doing it by hand, there was absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? I think you'll hear from Karen several times over about how helpful a whiteboard is for her. And how, that's where she kind of gets out of your brain, right? And that's all about that rubber ducking, right? Getting something out of your brain and onto paper or onto a visual tool or onto a whiteboard or onto a Post-it note, whatever it is, just getting things out of your brain makes it so much easier to make it actionable. And, I've got Post-it notes. Oh, you can't see it. Post-it notes all over my desk. I've got a wire-bound notebook that I use all the time. You should have seen me. I was so proud of upgrading from a legal pad to a wire-bound notebook. That was my big change like a year or two ago, and now I have, notebooks that I go through left and right. And if you look back at them, they last me, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. And you go back to the beginning of them and you think a crazy person is just writing down notes. You have no idea what they all mean. But I revolve around paper, right? So whatever tool works for you, definitely continue using it, or explore if you haven't found a tool that's helpful. Brandon, go ahead.
And I'm sorry, what was the name of this markup tool again?
This is called Preview. It's the kind of an application that's built into the Mac. So if you open up any like JPEG image or PDF, by default, it will open in Preview. And then the secret tool, kind of what's hidden in this, is that little markup button right to the left of the search bar. That's what gets you access to these squares. And then you can play with the border color of the square and the transparency of the square up at the top.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I can't zoom into those. It's one thing that I don't like about Preview, but Preview is a seriously underrated and powerful application in the Mac. If you want to think about it, it's like MS Paint meets a PDF. And that's kind of where Preview excels.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of MS Paint with, I mean, not even just the icon applicate or icon images, but yeah, the abilities and things like that. So yeah,
absolutely. And I will say we're processing all of your stipend paperwork. So the debit cards are in process and should be coming to you guys in the next couple weeks. But you can, if a printer is helpful for you, you can definitely buy a cheap printer. Sometimes the best way to annotate your code is by like handwriting right on top of it, right? And so that's totally fine if you want to buy a printer or just print out your code and start going at it. The most important thing of this boot camp is not good grades. It's that you're understanding what we're doing. It's so easy to go along for the ride and think that you're getting all the code. And then you get to that weekend homework assignment and you're like, where do I even begin? And so that's why we're going to be going through it in class tonight, is to touch on a little bit of that, because the benefit of you guys scheduling one-on-ones and asking for help is that I know where you guys are struggling, and we can review all of that as a class to make sure it's all going to sink in. Jordan made a good note that unfortunately I cannot screen share because Zoom hides its own screen share tools. But if you are in the middle of a screen share, up at that toolbar, the super annoying one with mute and stop video and all of that, there is something that says annotate. And if you go into annotate, you can actually draw right on top of your screen and you see the red scribble showing up. That's the tool that I use. So when I don't request remote control and I say, hey, click on this thing over here and I can circle it, that is one thing you can use to draw right on your screen if you are in a Zoom call and you're sharing your screen. One other tool that I will show you guys is you can also take a screenshot of your Mac. So if you hit Command, Shift, and 3, you'll hear a little camera sound effect go off. Then in the bottom right, you see this little screenshot appear. If you double click on that, that will also open you into a toolbar up at the top that's very similar to the preview toolbar. Again, that was Command, Shift, and 3 all at the same time if you want to take a screenshot. Then up at the top here, you can use those same tools to put a rectangle in, or you can go into scribble mode and actually start drawing out, a line that connects over here to this line over here. And you can start playing around that way. We'll be using the Zoom annotate tool so you guys can kind of see the code visually. But those are two very helpful tools that help you along your way. When you hit done, that screenshot disappears. But if you go to your Finder and go to the desktop, you will see that that screenshot is right there for you. Okay, all of that said, we've got a fun project on the news site tonight. So I'm going to, I don't know why I just closed that. I am going to keep my homework open kind of over on the side, and I'm going to go through. I know this is going to be lightning quick because we want to speed through this, but if you have any questions, just raise your hand, unmute me, say, whoa, give me a second. I need to process that. This is not something that I'm asking you guys to follow along with because you already did this for homework, right? So this is very much meant to be a review. With all of that said, I'm going to just check my Slack quickly. Okay. So I am going to head over to VS Code. VS Code, you guys have probably learned this the hard way, doesn't like having a single file open. It likes to have an entire folder open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File, Open Folder up at the top. I'm going to make sure I'm in the right spot. If I'm not, I'm going to go to Desktop. I'm going to go to my code folder. I'm going to go to week 2, and I'm going to create a new folder here called Homework. If you guys want to call it day 5 or whatever you want, that's totally fine. I'm going to hit Create there, and then I'm going to hit the Open button down at the bottom. Now, it doesn't look like I have anything open, but over here, I can see the HW is here. And because of that, I know I'm in the right place. Let me just close this extra window here. Now, to get a new file started here, I'm going to call this index. But we need to tell VS Code what kind of file this is. This could be CSS. This could be JavaScript. This could be a bunch of different extensions. So the important thing is we add the .html at the end of the file name. That's going to let go live work because now we're in the right folder and we've got that HTML file extension. So both of those combined is going to tell VS Code, hey, what we're putting in here is our HTML. Now, at the beginning of every HTML page, we need our HTML, our head, and our body. But that's kind of a lot to type out every time. So VS Code has a little shortcut for us that we're going to expose to you guys. Because it knows it's that HTML file extension, we can actually use a shortcut framework called Emmet. Emmet is built into VS Code and has all kinds of useful keyboard shortcuts. I will drop a link to them in the resources for tonight's outline if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that. The most helpful, I think, Emmet shortcut is if you hit an exclamation point and then hit enter, look at everything that gets dropped in for us. It sets the doc type to HTML. This is not a requirement, but a recommendation of HTML5 because it makes it a little bit easier for the browser to know what HTML syntax we're using. Then it puts in our HTML tag, which we're used to, but it adds another attribute on it called lang.en. This is actually for international translations. So if you have multiple versions of your website that are using different languages, this gives the browser a little bit more information. Okay, we've got our head and our body in here. Those we're familiar with, those we've been using. Then it sets the meta. Meta is this information that's being sent to the browser. And it sets the char set or the char set to UTF-8. This is basically telling the browser how the letter encoding is stored in binary, right? So this is super low level. Basically, what that char set does is it tells the browser we're using a modern form of text encoding. This also means that we can actually use emoji as part of our code because we're telling the browser how our text is being basically encoded at a very low level. Next, this is thankfully slowly dying. This XUA compatible IE equals edge. This is an old thing for Internet Explorer. So for people on super old browsers to say, try and use a modern way of interpreting this code. You guys are not going to get quizzed on this. You don't need to know what letter by letter all of this is doing, but you will find that when you're on a lot of different websites, you'll look in the head tag and you'll see a lot of this code going on here. This meta name viewport, content device width initial scale 1.0, this was actually born out of the iPhone. This is all about having our website be mobile responsive. So what this is doing is it's telling the web browser, hey, we've got some mobile responsive code coming here. This is a newer website, and you should be prepared to be able to zoom in on this. That's what the initial scale means. And by default, the width of the screen should be the width of the device. And so that's what that viewport is doing. And then finally, we've got our title tag, which we've seen before. That's what's setting the tab name up at the top. I know that was a lot. That was opening a new HTML file, hitting, clicking into it, putting an exclamation point and hitting enter. That drops in this template for us. Again, you don't need to memorize what all of this stuff is doing. That was a super quick overview. The important thing is that you're comfortable with HTML tag, the head tag, and the body tag coming in here. And that's just a short way to drop all of that in. I know that was a blast of new information, even though we're only in review. I'm going to pause there to see if there are any questions. I swear I did not have my afternoon coffee after 3 p.m. If you want to see me go even faster, wait until I have my 3 p.m. coffee. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to get started. So we've got our div class row here, right? Because we see the green box. Whenever we're working with a grid system, though, we put everything in a container to get started. That container is just going to do things to kind of center all of our content and keep it together. Then, before we can use a column, we need to put the column into its own row. That row is going to go inside the container, and we know it's inside the container because we've got a div here and the closing div here. So that means any code between 10 and 12 is going to be inside the container. So we're going to add our div class equals row in here. And then finally, we can get to our column. Do you have a question? Okay. So inside our row, we can do our div class equals col, and then we need to figure out the size of it, right? So everything on the Bootstrap grid system is based off of 12. So that means that if we have a 6, it's going to take up half the screen, and we have another 6, that's going to take up the other half of it. But this, to me, looks like it's a 3 over here and a 9 over here. So we're going to say div class col 3. Then we're going to say this is the closing div tag for this. Where do I want that next column to start? I want that next column to start when this col 3 is over. So I come to the closing tag of that col 3, put my cursor at the end of it, and do a div class col 9. Then finally, I can put my text in there. So I can say logo, and I can say menu. So after I do all of that, my go live should work because I've got my homework folder open. I didn't open the index.html directly from the file menu. I just opened the HW folder and got the right file extension. And when I click on go live, it's going to pop open in the browser. And oh boy, is that broken. Before we fix that, Jennifer, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to know if we didn't get like the column sizes right in our homework. Is
Totally fine.
Okay.
If you did a 4 and an 8 or a 6 and a 6 or whatever it is, it does not need to be spot on. Okay, so we are looking in the browser, and I've got my container, and I've got my rows, and I've got my columns, and I'm over here, and it's not working. What step did I miss?
Bootstrap.
Bootstrap, you got it. All of these containers and rows and columns, we didn't define them anywhere. We didn't come up here and put in a style tag and say, oh, my row is going to look like something. That's because all of that is coming from Bootstrap. So if we go to the Get Bootstrap website and go to the docs up at the top and down to introduction, we can scroll down and borrow this link tag here. So we're going to copy that link tag. We come back over to our code. We paste that in, and I accidentally copied the closing head tag with it as well. So make sure you don't have any stragglers. It should just be that one very long line that's coming over. Now, when I save that and come back over to my code, all of a sudden, my columns are looking the way that I want it to, and it's a much nicer font. My container is working, all of that stuff. So just so you guys know, Bootstrap is just CSS. So if I take this href and copy just that part of it, paste that into my browser, and I'm going to take out this little .min. That .min is minifying it. It's basically removing all the indentation and new lines and all of that. If I pop that open, that kind of looks familiar. If I scroll down a little bit, that looks like CSS. And we can actually look in here and say, hey, when we use the body tag, what Bootstrap is doing is saying there's no margin, and it's applying this default font family, and it's setting it to a certain text color and using all these CSS properties. And we can actually do a Command F on this for something like the container and see the CSS code that is making the container work. The only difference between the CSS we've been writing and the CSS that Bootstrap is providing is this is a couple thousand lines long. But all Bootstrap is pre-written CSS that we can take advantage of if we know what classes they use in the Bootstrap CSS. So everything down to our col-3 is defined in here and is setting things like the width for us. That is making that col3 work under the hood. Okay, so we've got that working. Now, there are two different approaches that we can kind of take when we're working on a project. We can either get all of the content on the page and then go back and style it, or we can go row by row and get it looking the way we want before we move on to the next one. That's the approach that I'm going to take here, right? We could go through and we could get all of our columns set up and then put all the content into it and then go back and style it. But I kind of like working at a row by row level. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my style tag that I added in here. And the first thing I notice is that gray background. That's what I want to target. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say, I've got a col3 here. So I'm going to go to my style tag and I'm going to target my col3. And I'm going to say the background color on that is going to be gray. Fun fact, you can spell gray with an A or an E in CSS and you will get the exact same color. Don't ask me which one I use consistently. I switch between the two of them all the time. Can't figure out if I'm British or not. Okay, so I come back over to my browser and I've got my gray showing up. But I also want that gray showing up over on my menu. So I come back over here and I add a comma and I say col9. Now I could come down here and add another one and say background color gray. But this is breaking a computer science principle called dry, D-R-Y, don't repeat yourself. That D-R-Y, don't repeat yourself. I'm repeating this background color gray here. So we look at the most efficient way of saying, how can we also make this background color apply to something else? And in CSS, we can use that comma. Now, we can't forget our period here because col9 is also a class. So I can take this out and I will still have my gray background. Okay, now two things I'm noticing. One, in my mockup, I've got a little space up at the top there. So what I can do is I can say, hey, go find my entire container. This container is referencing this class container down in my div. And I can say, I'm going to add a margin to the top of that container of 10 pixels. Come back to my browser. Now I've got a little white space going on at the top there. Now I'm going to come back to my code and I'm going to say menu should be over here on the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to my col 9 and say, hey, the text should be at the end of this div. Text end, another CSS, another Bootstrap property. If I don't have Bootstrap in here, that text end will not work. Now I've got this over on the right. Okay, all of that's going great, but I'm supposed to have a little gap between the logo and the menu so I can see that it's its own column. So I might be tempted to come over here and do a col 9 and say the margin on the left of this should be 20 pixels. Whoa, that broke. Okay, well, that broke because those 20 pixels were not accounted for in the grid system. So by adding these 20 little pixels, those two columns couldn't fit in the row anymore. They couldn't fit in the row, so that next column got pushed down to the next line where it does have enough space to show these 20 pixels on the left. So we are breaking that grid system by putting in margin that the row is not expecting to be in there. So what we're going to do is a little hacky, just a little bit. What we're going to do, instead of putting a margin in there, we're going to put a border in there. And we're going to say the border is only on the left side, and it's going to be 10px solid white. Now, this is really a 10px solid line, but because we said border left, it's only applying to the left side of it.
The left side of the menu.
The left side of the menu div. Yes. The div that the menu is in. Yes. Now, you could say, well, why don't you just do a col 3 with a border on the right of 10px solid white? That would also work. That border just got doubled because we've got 10 on the left now and 10 on the right now. So we could also say 5 and 5. That's also totally fine, right? This is just showing you there are multiple ways of achieving this code. So the important thing is the end result looks the way you want it to. That's the important thing, because you can argue all day whether it's better to have a border right that's 10px or a border left that's 10px or 5 and 5 on either side. Whatever makes it easier for you to understand the code, that's what you should be using, especially as a beginner developer. And don't be afraid to play around with this. Type in red, see where that red shows up. Understand why that red is only on the on that right half and not on the left half of this menu. Don't be afraid to be like, well, if it says solid, what else can I use? Can I use like a dashed? And now you see there's a dash in between the two of them. You can play around with those properties to find which one is the one that you want and go back to whichever one you prefer. Okay. We can keep going here. We say, all right, if I pull up my preview, I've got another row. I want to tackle that light green, right? That's showing me my rows. So I'm going to figure out where my row ends. It's not this closing div because that closes out the col 9. It's not this closing div because that's closing out the col 3. So if I go one indentation layer out, this div is closing this row. And I know that because if I click in that closing div, you see how I get that like light gray highlight on there? that's showing me that that is the closing div that matches. So I'm going to put my cursor after the closing div and hit enter and make sure not only am I within my container still, but that my indentation level is correct. So my cursor is at the same level of indentation here. It's not over here, which is where the container is, and it's not over here, which is where that column level is. It's over here. So I'm going to do my div class row. I'm going to get my cursor at the right spot, and I'm going to hit enter. VS Code's helping me out with that indentation. And now I look at this and I go, okay, this column looks a little, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it looks a little bit wider than this one. I'm not sure, but we're just going to guess an 8 and a 4 and see where that gets us. So we're going to use our div class col 8, and we're going to say this is the main section. And we're going to come back and do another div class, and we're going to say col 4. And we can say this is the aside. But right off the bat, that text is over on the right. It's over at the end of the div. So I can also use the text end property here to make both of those classes apply to my main and my aside. Okay, now I'm going to come in here and I say I want my background to apply to my col 8 and to my col 4. Okay, but now this is right up against this row at the top. Okay, so that means that I want a little bit of space between the two of them. Now, hypothetically, I could want a different amount of space between this row and a different amount of space between this row and whatever row comes next. So in order to do that, I'm going to come into this div and I'm going to add an ID to it called row 2. Now I come up to the top, and instead of a period, I'm going to use that hashtag or pound sign because it's an ID and not a class, and say the row 2 should have some margin on the top of it of 20 pixels. How did I know it was 20 pixels? I don't know, I guessed. If it's too much, you lower it down, play around with it, right? Okay, now I want that little gap to show up. So I'm going to come back up here and say that is going to apply to my col 8 as well. Now I've got a little gap going on there. It's not actually a gap. It's really a border that happens to be a white line. But because our background is white, we're able to use that as a way to break up the columns. Now, the last thing, you look at the mockup, we've got that it's a much bigger section there. So what we can do is we can say, hey, go target my col 8 and make the height of that col 8 200 pixels. Okay. So now we keep going. I'm going to just finish this off. We've got our div class row. We've got a div class col 12 because we want it to take up the whole space. We say that's going to be our sponsor section. I want this text to be at the center. And I want my background to apply to the col 12 as well. Then I come in here and I say I want my row 3 to have a margin on the top as well. I come down here, I add my ID of a row 3, and now I've got that spacing going on there. And now, because we're not copying and pasting our code, we're getting practice. If that gap ends up being too much, I can adjust it and it will apply it to both of those rows to bring it where I want. And then, last but not least, I'm going to do my next row. And I'm going to play around with that sponsors, right? So I'm going to do a div class col 2. I'm going to put the number 1 in it, and I'm going to just copy and paste this and change the number so all those numbers show up. Now they're showing up, but they're not quite where I want them. So I'm going to come up to my CSS. And I'm going to say, hey, my col 2 is going to have a background color of red, and I would like the text alignment to be centered. Then to finish it off, I can say, hey, on all of my col 2s, there's a border on the left side of them that is going to be 5px solid white. Now I get my little spacing going on between all of them. And the last thing I can do is say, hey, this ID is row number 4, and row 4 gets the same background that all of my columns have gotten so far. Oops. Row 4. Oh, you know what? That isn't going to work because my white background is overriding it. So here I can put in my gray color, and that will get me my spacing in between. And then I can add my margin top to my row 4 as well. And that gets me my spacing working. And then we would do our footer row. Again, identifying this div is this closing div here. My indentation is all lining up. So we can do our final div and we can put our footer down there at the bottom. And we can say this is going to be our row 5. And up at the top, we throw our row 5. And add in the margin. And we get our footer. I forgot my class on that, which is why it's not all lining up. Or Charles, did I see a hand raised?
You did, 'cause I noticed you just put ID. I didn't see the class in it, but you saw what you did. You just corrected it.
Yep. I'm going to.
So not a question or anything like that, but what really helped me was putting in a comment in each section that was a row to tell myself, okay, this is the end of this row, and then you can start the next one. And it just broke it down a little bit more legible, at least for me, so that I can understand, okay, this is, if I work on this, this is what it will, like, this is what's going to change. Just a suggestion.
Yep. And this is something that I don't do a ton of just because I'm used to reading those closing divs, but that's something that you can only get over time, right? That experience, you'll get better at understanding and matching up those divs. So if you want to add a comment in here at the end of every div tag, that is something that you can definitely do. The computer doesn't care because you've got this exclamation point and the double dash. It knows to ignore anything that's coming inside of that. And then that does make it a little bit easier to know where those closing divs line up. I know you guys all did your homework just as quickly as we just went over that, right? Just sped right through it.
Absolutely not.
9th time's a charm.
I was doing okay, but I got stuck between the logo and menu, and I couldn't do a separation between the two. It's just one long row with logo and menu on each end.
That's okay. You'll get full credit for that. Or you should if
Yeah,
you don't, let me know.
I can't get my pink to go on down to my footer. I got
So
on the whole thing, and it's all spaced out and right, but I can't get the pink on the footer.
So check your closing div tags and make sure that all of your divs are closed off and that your opening div for the footer is at the right spot, right? It should still be inside the container. Because something as simple as taking this footer and just moving this footer to the other side of the div, look at how much that screws up your site. Right? That's all because we accidentally put our footer outside of the container. Well, the container is what's doing all the magic and making it literally stay all in a container. So what we just did is we poured our footer right outside of the glass and it went everywhere. So by just taking this footer and making sure it's inside of our container, instantly fixes all of the alignment issues. Jennifer, go ahead.
Thank you. When you were working on the 1 through 6 buttons, as I call them,
Mhm.
I just got a little lost following along.
Okay, yeah, let's go through that. So the buttons are, I think they were meant to be like ads initially, but the mockup is pretty vague on that, right? So we used our rows and our columns just like anything else. I use a -2 here because there are 6 columns, right? So we take 12, we divide it by 6, that gives us 2. And then if we wanted to, this was not in the mockup, but if for whatever reason you're like, oh, I want the third column to be much bigger, and I want to take these down and make them smaller, you can always play around with that and see, hey, this 3 is now twice the size because I made it a 4, and these 2 are shrinking up. But I'm going to put that back to the way it was. Once I got all of these showing up, I knew I wanted to get some styling on that, right? Because it's hard to kind of tell where the columns begin and end. So I went up to the top. I made my col 2, and I targeted it with the selector with the period because it matches the class name. And then I just added some properties onto it. So background color is what's making it red. Text align center is the same thing as adding a text dash center to the classes down here. It's accomplishing the same thing. The only difference is we're doing it in our CSS instead of adding a class. And then I added a little bit of a border onto it. So because my mockup has the border as gray between them, I made the border gray here. And I forgot to fix something in here, which is why they're not all fitting together. There we go. And then the only other thing that I should probably do to make it line up with the mockup is make the color white. And that's what makes the numbers a little bit easier to see. And no, it's not font color white. And no, I can't tell you why it's not font color because everything else is. And then if you guys wanted to, you could do like the font dash size up to like 36 px. And that just makes everything bigger, maybe too big, but that's how you could play around with that. Now it is cascading its way down. Notice I just put that font size on the container. Well, because that container holds all of my different content, that font size is going to not only get applied to things directly in the container, but anything that trickles down all the way down to the content itself. Christina, go ahead.
You keep highlighting and doing something to make it all go to one way. What are you doing? How
What
do
do
you
you
do
mean?
that? Because I tried to make it all indent, like you highlight and move it over, and I lost everything.
So if you highlight multiple lines, you can hit the tab key and it will indent it over for you. And then if you hit shift tab, it will unindent it back.
Perfect, thank you.
No problem. Is that super boring review or super helpful review?
Awesome.
Yeah, very helpful. It's just one of those things where you just see how much you were struggling at the time, and then you're just like, oh, you just do this, and that. Oh.
Same.
That is okay. That is a very, and
Especially in terms of efficiency, this helps a lot because mine, I'm upset that yours is 13 lines shorter than mine.
Mentioned that too. Like I'm comparing our lines and stuff, and I'm just like, how's he doing this less than me? I got like all these lines and stuff.
so I will say that, so refactoring, if anyone's keeping a terms list for the end of class, we can define refactor. But it is very common to refactor your code, right? And so what that means is you want to get it working first, and you come over here and you go, okay, this is the way I want it to look. and then you save your code, you make a copy of it. We'll learn Git so that you'll learn how to commit your code in. And then we start fiddling with it, and we start looking at this, and we start going, well, can we refactor this code to be a little bit more efficient in any way? Can we say, hey, there's extra spaces in here that we don't need. Let's go ahead and take them out. Or, is it more efficient to put a text center on each one of these classes as opposed to doing a text align up here, right? Refactoring is just a way to review our code and make sure that it is as dry, don't repeat yourself, as possible. So it's definitely common to review your code before you say, hey, this is the final version of it.
Does efficiency have a direct correlation to less code, or sometimes are just gonna have that?
Absolutely not. Sometimes, sometimes the computer can read more lines of code faster than it can run fewer lines of code. And so code is not only about making it efficient for the computer, it's also making it readable for another developer. Because chances are you're going to work on some code that another member of your team is going to work on, or you're going to leave the company, move on to another one, and someone else is going to come in and be working on the code that you wrote. And so sometimes having multiple lines, right? This isn't any more efficient for the computer. The computer doesn't care that you put those comments in, but for the next developer coming in, it's much easier for them to go, oh, okay, this div is closing out for this row. In fact, the computer, it would be more efficient to not have any tabs or any new lines. It would be more efficient for the computer to run all of this code without any line breaks or tabs. But we would never do that to another developer, because then it would be so hard for them to read it, right? So you'll notice that when I'm helping you guys on the code along exercises, the first thing I do, you go, oh, div's missing. I got a red squiggly here. And if your indentation isn't right, the first thing I'm going to do is fix your indentation, and then we're going to be able to fix the problem. The computer doesn't care about the indentation, but I can't find your problem unless my trained eyes are going through and seeing where all of those indents are. Because your problem might not actually be where that red squiggly is. It might be that you put your div outside the container instead of inside of the container. And the only way as humans that we can visually see that structure is by having that layer of indentation, right? Because what we're basically doing is comparing how readable this code is to that. If you guys look at that, can you tell me my col2 is inside a row that's inside a container? That's why that indentation matters, right? Because the computer, if I save this, come over here, it looks exactly the same. Computer doesn't care about that indentation, but we obviously do, because how can you tell what any of this code is now doing without that indentation?
Yep, that makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions on the homework before we move on to our new code? Can't promise that we'll do a homework review every week, but this early on, know that that frustration is common, right? Some of you guys reached out to me on Slack. That's great. Some of you guys scheduled one-on-ones. That's great. Keep it going. Frustration is part of a boot camp. This is what you guys signed on for. But when you get pushed through that frustration, get to that understanding, be proud of what you got working, and then move on to the next assignment, or the next task, or the next whatever. You guys want to celebrate those wins, right? Archerelle, go ahead.
Perfect timing. That's why I raised my hand. I celebrated like 2 small wins. I tried stuff in the work. I was like, yes. I outlied in my place because I was so ecstatic. I'm like, this is what Max was talking about.
Absolutely.
I was at work doing that.
People think you're crazy, and as a developer, you probably are a little bit insane, but Kalai, go ahead.
sorry, I got lost with the homework, but now I understand everything. So, but I try to, because I think I didn't finish the weather app, but I tried to work on that and I got that one completed over the weekend. One
Nice.
question is, what does the HR stands for?
HR is header row. So that basically gives us like a little border of separation between two sections. I can throw one in, like if I throw one between my sponsors and my red, you see that little line that appears between it? That's this little gray thing, that's a header row.
Because I was looking at some the optional assignment and it says horizontal rule or something, so I wasn't sure what is that.
Oh,
Yeah.
horizontal rule. You're right. It's not header rule, it's horizontal rule. Sorry, that is definitely the right one. I misspoke there. I'm probably not the best one to ask what it stands for because I've used thousands of divs and learned last cohort that div stands for division. So just goes to show you sometimes you can use an acronym a lot and have no idea what it stands for.
No, I think like I was focusing on following up with you and I didn't hear HR at all. So I was completely lost. What does that stand for? Okay.
And the good news is all of this was recorded. So you can go on YouTube, put me down to 0.5 speed so that I'm actually going slow enough and then go through all of this. And oftentimes you will wish I have a pause button in real life, but on the recording, you can always pause, go try whatever you're doing, and then go back and play it. So, you know, I know that it's a huge time commitment to go back through and rewatch those videos, but if you get stuck on one section of that homework assignment and you need to go back and rewatch this one to understand where you got stuck on your own, that's a good practice. Brandon, go ahead.
Okay, so I just want to just double check on something
Sure.
from forward. So because I'm still working on this homework assignment because I'm personally very much a perfectionist and I want to have it exactly as is.
Sure.
And what I have is still very choppy. So pretty much my question is, would you just like us to send in what we have before class? So then, I mean, you said that we're not going to be going over every single homework assignment, but like, would you like us to still send those in, and then that will give you guys time to make comments and suggestions?
So I would say it depends. So if you're like, I need another day on this, if I turn this in, I know I'm going to get a 1 on it. Let me just take another day and then I'll turn it in and probably get a 2. Don't bother turning it in. If you think you're going to get a 1 on the assignment, I would rather you just wait until you're feeling better with it and then turn that in. However, if you're at that point where you're like, oh, why is the footer here, but this is indented a little bit, and you're like, I want to get that fixed, right? Like this little footer indentation is not going to be enough to mark you off or to give you a 1. So I would say that if you are you're struggling with it, you're still making progress on it, and you just need another day or 2, don't bother turning it in. But if you're at that point where you're like, I'm just being a perfectionist here and I can keep working on it for my own sanity, but this is close enough, this is in the spirit of the assignment, go ahead and turn it in.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this? See, I'm trying to be better at telling you guys when to follow along and when not to. This is one that I would never expect you guys to be able to code along at this pace, right? This is 10 years of professional practice to get up to this. But I hope just a tiny little bit of that is inspiring to know that you can get up to this speed, and that most of the senior developers that I work with are actually able to build something like this out in about an hour. Okay, we are going to just get our files set up and then we will go on break. So we are going to be building, I'm going to close out of this, I'm going to leave Bootstrap. Oh, well, I'll pull it back up. Down in the week 3, day 2 outline, there's something that says news site mockup. If you click on that link, you might have to click on the little pop-up that shows up. It's going to give you this. This is what we are going to be building. I can't promise that we're going to get it done by tomorrow because we've got the short week with the holiday and open hack, but we are going to start building this today. What we're going to do is download it. If you would like to follow along with the gridding out step, we're going to start that after break. You are welcome to getting that practice in preview, kind of breaking it all down. This is one that the grid exercise is really helpful to be able to see that a row doesn't necessarily need to be a short little thing. And in this one, we are going to be putting rows we're going to be taking rows and putting columns in those rows, then using a row inside that column to put another column in there. We're going to see that kind of play out over here for the first time. But this is the site that we are going to make. If you want to follow along and have a copy of this mockup and break it all down in preview, you are welcome to hit the download button up here. Otherwise, feel free to just keep this file open. Spoiler alert, I did put the breakdown of the grid file here, but I would suggest not opening that until we go through the exercise and kind of do it ourselves. And you guys can identify where the rows and the columns are on all of that. I'm going to have that downloaded. We're going to come back to that after break and get the practice of drawing the rectangles and recognizing our rows and our columns and all of that fun stuff. For now, I'm going to switch back over to my VS Code. And this is where following along is definitely recommended. We're going to go to File, Open Folder up at the top. Doesn't matter what's open. We're going to do a new folder. Now, I'm in my week 2 folder here, but we're not in week 2 anymore. So I'm going to go back up to my desktop. I'm going to go to my code folder. And now I'm in my week area. I'm going to go to New Folder, and I'm going to create a week 3 and hit Create. Now that I'm in my week 3, I'm going to create a new folder called Day 2. In general, Day 2 is always Tuesday. So I know we didn't have class, which would have been Day 1, but I find it just easier to keep hey, whenever I'm in a Day 2 folder, I know that's the code we did on Tuesday. So we won't have a Day 1 for week 3. That's okay. Holidays happen. We're going to create a Day 2. And now that I've got my Day 2 up at the top here, I'm going to click on Open. That's going to get me into my VS Code. I'm then going to come over to the left here. I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this news.html. And I'm going to hit Enter there. That's going to get me in over here. And I'm going to use our new shortcut. So I could type out my HTML and my body and my my head and all of that stuff. But I'm going to hit the exclamation mark. That's going to give us this little pop-up. And then I'm going to hit Enter, and it's going to, bam, drop all of that code in for us.
Awesome.
I'm going to come down to my document, and I'm going to change that to news, to my title tag. And then in my body, I'm just going to put an H1 that says, hello. Come down to my go live, click on my go live, and I should get my hello showing up in my browser. Schneider, go ahead.
So do we bother removing the meta and all that other stuff, or do we just leave it be?
All of this stuff is good. This is setting up your browser to know that you can use things like emojis. This is telling Internet Explorer that it's an old fart and try and show your code in the most modern way possible. And this is setting up your website to be mobile responsive on like iPhones and other devices. So all of that stuff is good to have in there. That's all helping the browser out.
So going forward, do you want us to like use the shortcut or do we still write out the format for the HTML?
The shortcut's probably preferred only because that's going to be like the most modern code. So I would recommend using the shortcut, but if you're still feeling like you're getting practice writing out all of those tags by hand, you're more than welcome to do that.
Gotcha, thanks.
And Max, we still have to put our bootstrap in here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And so we'll do that right now. Thank you for the reminder. So I'm going to open a new tab. I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. I'm going to click on docs up at the top. I'm going to go over to our introduction. I'm going to go down to number 2 and grab my link tag. I'm going to copy all of that over. I'm going to go back to my VS Code, and I'm going to put it between the meta and the title tag. I don't know why I'm putting it there. That's just something. I shouldn't say it doesn't matter the order of the head tag, but for the level of sites that we're building, it doesn't really matter where you put that, but it should definitely be between the opening head and the closing head. And it should be on its own line. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to come back over to my browser and I'm going to get a font change. That means my Bootstrap is working. Now, the last step we're going to do, we've covered it once before, but it's a little bit new. It's generally preferred to not use inline CSS. That means when we do the style equals on a tag, that's called inline CSS. Not generally preferred in regular HTML. We could put our style tag up at the top, which is a little bit more preferred, but still not necessarily the best way to do it because it's a little messy, right? To have our CSS syntax mixed in with our HTML syntax. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new file over here called style.css. That .css, super important. We are then going to say, hey, my H1 should have a color of red. Now I'm going to switch back to my news, and that's a pain to switch back between these two all the time. So what I can do is I can grab my style.css and kind of just drag it over until that gray looks like it's filling up half the screen. I did that by grabbing the style tag up at the top and dragging it over, till I get it kind of over there. And when I let go, I have both of the files open now. And I can take this middle one and kind of shove it over to the right a little bit more to have it separated out. Brandon, go ahead.
I'm sorry, how did you open that second, the tag style CSS?
Yep. Hover over your Explorer toolbar over here on the left, go up to New File, click on New File, and then call that style.css. Or Cheryl, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to follow. So I'm hovering over where it says, okay, got to hover, that blue border's there. New file. Okay. Style CS, hashtag style CSS. All right.
Jordan, go ahead.
Would you mind live sharing with us?
Yes, I will start the live share after break. Okay. The last thing we need to do before break, and now this is where order is going to matter. I'm going to do a new link tag here, but I want it to come after my Bootstrap. Why would I want it to come after the Bootstrap? Does anyone have an idea?
Does it have anything to do with like just the order of it?
Yeah, it's the order. I want my CSS to override whatever CSS is in the Bootstrap. Sometimes we want to say, yeah, Bootstrap, you're trying to be helpful here, but I want this to look different. So we want to put that link tag underneath the Bootstrap link tag so the browser knows whatever one loaded last is the most important, the one that we want to override everything else. So we're going to do a link, and we've got to tell it what kind of link are we putting in here. So we say the rel is equal to a style sheet. Now we've got to tell it where is that style sheet. So we say the link href is going to be in our style.css. Come over here to my browser, and now I get hello in red. That hello in red is telling me this h1 over here in its own little file is properly being pulled in through my link rel style sheet. And because of that, my h1 shows up the way I want it to.
I just see your code again for a second for the
Sure.
style sheet.
It's over here on the right.
I see that one, but I'm looking at the link CSS. Okay, so I don't need another caret at the end to close it. I just need the slash. Okay. Thank you.
Schneider, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question regarding, for example, the closing. You see that slash? Do you
Yep.
only have to put that there, or can you just stick with the little tag?
That?
Yeah, like that.
Yeah, so head is a little weird in that you don't actually need to close the tag. So down here, you should always have a self-closing tag if you're not going to have any content between the two tags.
Mhm.
The head section is a little weird in that this is completely valid HTML, and so is this. The validator will go through both of them and will let you use either one of them. So the head section is an exception. But because you need the self-closing tags down here, I personally prefer to leave that in, but it is personal preference. The computer will read it fine either way.
Got you. And my second question has to do with overriding Bootstrap. I was doing the optional homework, and my question is, why not just use the important thing to override it, or does that not work?
Yeah, you can use important. It's not encouraged though, because what happens if you have 3 CSS files and you would like to override the CSS in one and then override it again in another? You can't important something in CSS. So important is really meant to kind of be used as like a last reserve kind of thing. It's not intended to be, it's an override, not a cascade. And cascading is generally preferred over an override.
Understood. Thank you.
I'm glad you understood that, because that made sense in my head and not when I actually spoke the words.
Pretty much, I just got those important in those kind of situations, pretty much.
Jordan or Artrell, do you have questions, or are you caught up or working on it?
Caught up, I believe. I think we were only supposed to create the style CSS, which I did. I think that was the
Yep.
step I missed, but I figured it out.
If you get red hello in your browser, you're all caught up.
Okay. Let me check.
Artrell, you good too?
No.
Okay, I'm coming back to you after Gonza.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So can you explain a little bit the second link? Why, like, what is a style sheet, and like, what does rel mean?
Yeah, so rel means relative. So it's like, what is this relative to? Like, I'm in HTML, what's going on with that rel? And so we put the rel style sheet in because in theory, you could link to something other than a style sheet.
Okay.
I can't remember the last time that I've used the link tag to something other than a style sheet. So almost always you use that style sheet. Now, what the external style sheet is if we came in here and we said style and we said our H1 and our color is now blue, you'll notice it turns blue over here. That's because this style tag is coming after this link tag here. So if we took this link tag and actually put it down here, I believe we would still see it in red. So that's just showing you the order matters. The only difference between this and this is that we're able to take any of our code and move it into a separate file. And so that's usually preferred because it's keeping your HTML all in its HTML and its CSS over in its own separate file. So what
Okay.
you're going to be seeing is as we go through this, I'm going to put something on the page and then want to style it. So what
Mhm.
this allows me to do is instead of flicking up and down all the time to get back up to my style, I'm able to have it in its own little file over here and add in things quickly.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. Artrell, go ahead.
All right. When you spoke to me about a minute ago, was my hello supposed to be red or black?
Red.
All right, mine is still black.
Okay. If you guys have a red hello, you are welcome to go on break. We will say 7:30. We will be back from break. And then I'll stick around and help anyone who needs it. Archer, go ahead and share your screen. Archer, can you share your screen?
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to press shit like a dummy. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You can see it,
Okay.
right?
Yes, I can. So you got two problems going on here. One, do you see how this news is indented a little bit here, but the style right here is not? That means that this style file over here is not actually inside of your day 2 folder.
Oh.
So if you just grab your style file and drag it in to your day 2 folder.
So highlight this.
Yep. And click and drag it right on top of the D2 and let go and hit move. Now it is inside of that same folder, which is good. The other thing is you've got that hashtag in there. We don't want that in there. So if you right click and rename that file. And take out the hashtag at the beginning of it and hit enter. Look what we have.
Aha. Okay. Thank you. I don't know why I didn't have it in the day 2 folder, but that makes sense now. So thank you.
No problem. I think the problem is when you opened your workspace, instead of opening the day 2 file, the day 2 folder, you opened the week 3 folder instead.
Ah, okay.
Which is not the end of the world, but that's probably how you ended up in that spot.
Okay.
1 second. Vincentia, sorry, go ahead.
Should I just share my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so when I go live, now it works. Maybe
you fixed it.
Maybe I don't. I did that, but okay. When I do have, and this seems to give me trouble a lot, is getting into the right folder. So
Okay.
if I want to go back and run, like say one of the grid, I think we called it grid.html.
Yep.
If I wanted to run that, how would I open it up so that it runs? Because like when I started today, every time I would go live, it would actually run, I think like the weather application.
Yeah, so the trick is not to open like grid.html. The trick is to open the folder that grid.html is in and then go live on that. So in VS Code, instead of going file open and going to the grid file, you want to go file open folder and go to whatever folder the grid file is in, open that folder and then go live.
Okay. Okay. I think, yeah. 'Cause somehow, I guess when I restarted everything the way, I followed with you.
Yep.
And then I was able to open it. So I think maybe after I do it a couple of times, I'll remember to open into the right place.
Yeah,
Um,
that's something you get practice on. In general, the general rule of thumb is that you want to always file open folder. You never want to file open.
Okay. Okay. All right. I have one more question.
Shoot.
Every time you put the meta in, I'll look away and I don't see how you do the shortcut.
Okay. It's when you have a new file started,
Mhm.
you do an exclamation point. So like literally just click into the file, do Shift 1, and then hit enter, and it bam drops in the whole template for you.
Okay, just did that. All right.
Good work.
Thank you.
Nyasia, go ahead.
I got lost like when you copy and pasted the other links, I think.
Okay. Not far off. Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah. Make sure I'm sharing the right one. Let's share this.
Okay. So I'm gonna just remote control to help you get caught up. Okay. So we it looks like we lost a little code, right? Oh, does it say open system preferences somewhere?
What is? I think it did say something. Hold on. I don't remember it though. Hold on.
Let me see. Is it gonna? No. Let me stop. And can you?
Oh, there it go.
Looks like a closing tag, Max.
Yeah, I was just trying to get remote control in.
Okay.
Can you start your screen share again?
Yeah.
I bumped it temporarily. I think if I go back in, it will get it back. Okay, let me request again. And did it pop up the system preferences thing?
Yeah.
Okay, so click on open system preferences. And then you got to click on the lock in the bottom left to unlock it. And then you can check off Zoom on the right side.
All right, I did it.
Okay, and now, there we go. Now I'm in. Okay, so we lost a couple lines of code right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the, hold on, I'm controlling you. So I'm just going to take this code out and start over with a fresh template. And that's going to get everything going on in here. So that was just Shift 1 for the exclamation point, and then you hit enter, and that dropped all of that in.
Oh, Shift 1. Okay.
Yep, just an exclamation point and enter, and that drops all of that in. Then we're going to come here, and this is where we're going to put our link tag. So if you go to getbootstrap.com, I can't see it because you're only sharing that one. You're only sharing your VS Code window.
I don't know how to share the other.
That's fine. If you just you can do that step for me. If you go to getbootstrap.com in a different window.
Okay, I got it.
Okay. Go to intro, scroll down to number 2, grab the link tag and copy that.
Intro. Oh, the link tag that we always get, right?
It's just the link tag. You don't need the head underneath it.
Okay. 1 second. There we go.
Okay, and then if you come back over to your HTML, you should be able to paste it on line 7. Okay, and save that. And then we need just 2 more things here. I'm going to put in right after that, I'm going to put in another link tag with the rel equal to style sheet and the href equal to our style.css. And that's just going to link in whatever we have in this file. So now finally here, we can do our H1 that says hello. And you should have a red hello in wherever your live server is.
Yep, I got one.
Then you are all caught up and good to go.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Christina, go ahead.
I'm getting a black hello.
Okay, go ahead, share your screen. Let's take a look.
Oh, my bad. Share screen. Share.
Okay. So I notice here everything. Oh, let me request remote control. Okay, so here you notice how all of this goes red. That to me says, hey, there's a problem going on up here. And so what's happening?
Twice, right?
What's that?
The link? No. Okay, sorry, my bad.
That was just missing. So, oh, and you do have this twice here.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Okay, so if we fix both of those, now when we come over here, let me save. This is, I'm gonna just stop this and restart it. Sometimes it lags. What's going on there? Okay, so you got an extra quote there. Take that one out. And then, so we also need to link to our own style sheet. So we're going to do a link. We're going to say the rel is a style sheet. And make sure that's in the quotes. And then we're going to say the href to that. Where is that style sheet going to show up? It's going to be in our style.css. And then over here, we're going to do a new file called style.css. And we're going to add our H1, which is going to be a color red. Come over here, we save that. And now we've got our red hello.
Hey, thank you.
No problem.
I get it.
Anyone else for questions? Okay. I will see you guys at 7:30. All right. Give everyone a minute to jump back on and we will dive back in.
Hey, Max, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I know that the mouse I got is Bluetooth, but if I
Yep.
want a keyboard, does that have to be a specific brand or can it be any brand as well?
It can be any brand. You want to look for a Bluetooth keyboard as well, so you don't need like the little adapter.
Okay.
Unless you want a wired keyboard and then you just have to use a USB-C to USB-A adapter.
No, I'll just get a Bluetooth one.
Yep. You'll notice that like most keyboards have like the Windows key on them and the control option command that is on your Mac keyboard are not the same. You can go into system preferences though and adjust that to make those keys do whatever you want.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I will, let me share my screen. So if you go to system preferences and keyboard, and then go to modifier keys down in the bottom right, you'll see that like these can be mapped. So I've got these keys kind of line up, but you can change them in here to make them line up with whatever you want. So like on my keyboard, I have Control, Windows, and Alt, and I use the Alt key on my external keyboard to be where the Command key is supposed to be.
I got you. Okay.
So you can map them in if they don't line up to do what you want them to do when you just first plug them in. But my Alt key on the external keyboard is where the Command key is on my Mac keyboard. The Windows key is where the Option key is, and then Control stays as Control. So if you find that like it's not lining up with the same keys, you can swap them around to do whatever you want.
Perfect, thank you.
Hey, Max, what chair do you use?
My chair, so I have all of that in a blog post on my blog. I try to update it every year and then always forget about it and then do it every like 3 years instead. But I've got a Steelcase gesture chair. It is stupidly expensive and I would never buy one new. But it's one of the only chairs I found that I'm comfortable in. And they go on sale used on Facebook, like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, relatively frequently, and you can get a decent chair for like a fifth of the price of it being new. So I've bought 2 used versions of this, the Steelcase Gesture and the Steelcase, is it the Leap? The Leap V2 is what I have, and then the Gesture is like a slightly newer, slightly higher end one. I absolutely love this chair. It is super adjustable. They are built like tanks. They last forever. Like I said, I would never pay the full price for it new, but you can get them used on Facebook Marketplace for a pretty good price if you're willing to pick it up. I think I paid like $200, which for a chair I know is still not cheap, but absolutely love this chair. I had the Herman Miller Aeron chair, which is like the quintessential like super high-end chair. Absolutely hated it. Could not stand it. It made my right before my knees sore because it had a weird padding section on it. Could not stand it. So finding a chair you like is definitely personal preference.
Yeah, makes sense. These chairs are looking a little too expensive, $1,000.
Yeah, like I said, would never pay the full price for it new, but because they are built so well, you can still get parts for them. So if you need to fix something on it, you can, but I think I paid like $175 for one and $200 for another. Just buying them used. Still a lot for a chair, I get it. But you know, when I spend 12 hours a day in front of a computer Monday through Thursday. And so if you think about it, you know, you spend a couple $100 on your mattress and get a good mattress because you spend a third of your life on it. I spend a third of my life in this chair. So worth investing if you have the financial resources to do so.
Right. Gotcha. Thank you. I'm just looking for like a comfortable chair because this one is okay, but you know, it's not going to be lasting in this cohort probably.
Yeah. I don't know that many Facebook Marketplace people will take a debit card for your stipend, but something that I like keep an eye out for whenever I see a Leap chair V2 from Steelcase. I actually have a second one for my friends when they come and work out of my house because I love the chair so much.
Okay. The Leap one is a little cheaper. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so we are going to dive in here. We've got our style sheet all set up. We've got our news file all set up. We are good to get off to the races. So I'm going to pop open my downloaded file, that mock-up from tonight's outline. And I open that up, and by default, it opens it open in preview. So what we're going to do is we're going to identify all of the rows first, and then we will go back in and put in all of the columns. So I'm going to go up, and this is optional. If you want to follow along, you can. If you want to just skip to the finished product and cheat, that's linked down in the resources, so you can reference that as well. So it's up to you if you want to follow along with this part. It's totally optional. Once we get to the code, I'm going to encourage everyone follow along, unless you are someone who is finding that learning by taking notes and coding it later is more helpful. That's also totally fine. But for this exercise, totally optional. I'm going to do my rows in green. I popped open the file in preview. I clicked on the markup button in the top right to the left of the search bar. I went over to my rectangle with a little half circle behind it. I went down and I grabbed my rectangle. That put a rectangle in here. If it is not green and you would like it to be green, you can come up to the top here and change your border color. And then you can grab this rectangle and kind of put it at the corner. And our first row is going to go right there. I'm going to copy and paste that. And I bring my second row down, and my second row is going to be right there. Does not have to be pixel perfect. You can always go back and fix it later. I'm then going to copy and paste this. Who wants to guess where my next row is going to be?
Some story about new developers?
Believe it or not, this entire thing is going to be my next row. Because we are then going to go in and put in a new rectangle and start breaking down our columns. So one column is going to go here. One column is going to go over here. And my last column is going to go here. Now, those are mega massive big columns, and that's okay, because we're going to be able to go in and put rows inside of those columns. And then we can use columns again. We're going to see how that plays out in our code. Before we get into breaking that out, though, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to break out my upper section into 3 columns. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? This is not turning into our final product. This is just for us to be able to reference, hey, where's my col 3 going to go? How many columns are in this row? How many rows should I have total? Okay, now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say, all right, this is something on the left and something on the right. Well, that's its own row. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to make my next rectangle. I'm going to say, hey, this looks like a row to me. Rows are in green. And then I break that up. I say, hey, I've got a column that's going to be in red right here. And I've got another column for my headline right here. Now I can copy them. You holding Command, it will let you select 2 of those, I hope. Maybe it won't. Maybe it will be a pain. Maybe Shift. No, it's going to be a pain. I'll just do it one by one. I've got another column here. And I've got my final column here. And grab my row. Got one row all here. And I've got another row down here. See if I can clean that red one up at all, or if it's going to be a pain. It's going to be a pain. And then I can grab this heading, put that in place, and get my final one. Anyone have any questions while I'm working on this?
Yeah, can we pause for a moment?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's go. Keep going here. If you don't have it fully finished, that's not a problem. You can always reference the final one that's in the outline. You can actually see how true to my word I am about what I made earlier and what's going to line up here. And sometimes if we have a row that doesn't need columns, we can just make that a div. We don't necessarily need to put the class row on it unless we're going to use columns inside of that. And so over here, because this is all in one big column that's holding all of that, maybe we identify here that advertisement needs to be in its own div so we can get it centered. And we could do a div and a div here, or we could play it a little fast and loose and just say, hey, all of this stuff is going to go inside that column. So sometimes you don't always identify all of the divs you're going to use. Sometimes you go a little overboard during this process. Sometimes you realize, oh, I missed the columns here. I need to add that into my code. That's okay, right? This does not need to be perfect. We are just identifying the basic layout here. And while this looks crazy, hopefully we start to identify, all right, we're actually only going to have 3 rows inside of our container, at least at that top level. But as we start breaking them down, we're going to have a col, and a col. And then we're going to have this is all one big div. And then in here, we have a column, but we have another green box. That means we're going to have another row. And then inside that row, this is now reset to 12. So we could do a 3 and a 9 here. And that is going to be based off of the parent row size, not based off of the entire column or the entire row spanning across. It's going to be that 12 is reset because we put another green in there. We got a div class row. If you don't understand that, that's okay. We're going to dive into the code, and maybe seeing the code will make it a little bit more tangible. Do we have any questions on the mockup before we move forward?
So for the pictures, you wouldn't put, those wouldn't be in their own box?
We could. It depends if you needed 2 pictures like side by side, like if these were left and right of each other.
Mhm.
Then yeah, I definitely would put them in their own box. But because they're taking up the full width of the column, I'm not going to put them in their own div. But as I'm coding, I may be like, oh, this is being a pain. I want to just like be able to target that one image. At that point, I could put it in its own div or add a class directly to the image.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got the 6 minutes, 15 minutes, and 45 minutes. That's its own column.
Correct.
Of the latest column. Yeah.
Yep.
And then the row for the 6 minutes and the headline 1, the 15 and the headline 2, the 45 and the headline 3. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I have that right.
Okay. I'm going to start a live share with you guys. If you would like, oh, did the wrong one. If you would like to open this, I would recommend you do File, New Window, go to the live share option and click on Join, and then go through those steps. I just set the link in the live stream channel in Slack. If you would like to pull it up from there. And give me 1 second and we will dive into. Okay, so we've got everything set up here. We're going to dive right on it. So we're going to do our div class container. We should never use a row unless it's in a container. Then we are going to do our row. So we're going to do our div class row. And we've already identified we have 3 columns, 1, 2, and 3. And because they're all equal width, we don't actually have to specify the size. So normally we would do 3 col 4s, but because they're all the same width, I can get started by just putting a col on them. And I'm going to create all 3 of my cols. Right? I'm creating basically the holes to put my content in. Then I'm going to say menu, CIC news, and sign in. I'm going to fix my indentation. Switch back over to my browser. I've got menu, CIC news, and sign in. They're not quite at the right spot, but I'm going to pause here, give you guys a minute to catch up on that.
Max, how do I close my preview window and not lose it?
You want to be switching between the 2 windows. So you can use Command Tab, which will switch you between your Chrome and your VS Code.
No, it's the preview mockup. I can't get the window to get out of the way.
Oh, do you have a done button in the top right?
Done button. Yeah, thanks. Okay.
That might close it, but it should be on your desktop. If you double click on it, it will open like a regular window and not an annoying thing that you can't get rid of.
Yep. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, when you open the screenshot from like the thing in the corner, it does this weird, like it's not quite a window, but it's kind of a window. It's really annoying.
Mhm.
Okay, so we've got our menu, our CIC news, and our sign in. We want to start getting that looking the way we want, right? So when I look at that in preview, sign in's on the right. So I can go back to my VS Code and I can add a text end to that. And on my CIC news, I would like that to be centered in that div. Okay, good, it's on the right track, but I look at my preview and I've got that nice deep dark blue color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to use other rows here, right? I know I'm going to use other rows and I don't want all of those other rows to be dark blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an ID to my my row called navbar. That gives me something that I can select in my CSS. Now this H1 color red, that's just for testing, right? That's just making sure that we could see our 2 files were linked. So we can go ahead and delete that. And remember, this is my style.css. Anything I put in here is CSS. Anything I put over here is going to be my HTML. So now I can target my navbar and put in a background of navy. And I come over here. I got blue, got a little too much blue. My words are actually still up here, but I can't see them. They're not the right color. So if I come over here, I can add a new line that says color white. Now I come back over here. Okay, we're getting there. But the problem is that the blue doesn't go all the way to the edge of the screen. Well, I want it to go all the way to the edge of the screen. The problem is our site is trying to keep everything inside that container. So we're actually going to use a different container type in Bootstrap. Instead of using a regular container, we're going to use a container fluid. That's what pushes everything out for me. So now my container goes all the way to the edge of the screen. Okay, that's cool and all, but what is it about my mockup that doesn't make that feel like I just put a single div at the top of the screen, a single row? What that is just a little padding off the top and the bottom that's giving it a little bit of breathing room, right? We want to open our nav bar up a little bit, have it be a little bit wider. So what I can do is add padding to the top of 15 pixels and padding to the bottom of 15 pixels. And now I've got a little breathing room. I'm going to stop there and give you guys a poll, see how you're doing. Get this out of the way, get this here. So the final version that you should be seeing, your menu, your CIC news, your sign in button, you got a little bit of padding on the top and the bottom. You got everything aligning out this way. And this is what your final product should look like at this point. And I'm going to launch the poll. If you are caught up, go ahead and say sure did. If you are completely lost, go ahead and raise your hand in Zoom or reach out to Mel, who is our TA this week. I'm realizing I don't think I introduced Mel. And if you're still working on it, looks like a couple of you still are. That's okay. Give you guys a couple minutes to catch up. For those who have voted no, but keep going, make sure that you are reading this, taking a minute to take a break from your notes and just try and let that soak in. See if you have any questions that pop up, because otherwise you'll read your notes later and go, what the hell did I mean when I wrote this down? So take a moment to take a break and read through the code, see if you have any questions about why we did something or how something's linking up.
How should it look?
Like this.
Oh, I'm still.
So I think code is one of those really cool things, because you wouldn't think that you could build an interface that looks like that with just a, what, 32 lines of code, right? That's all that it's taken. And really, all of that magic is happening right here and right here. So it's amazing how we can take those little CSS properties and start piecing them together to make something that looks kind of like an actual full website. Got 14 people in. Brandon, go ahead.
Can you describe the purpose of the nav bar again, please?
Yeah, so all we're doing is we're giving us a CSS selector that we can hook into. Are you asking specifically about this part?
Also, is that kind of just like saying this row is navbar, with navbar we do XYZ?
Correct. Yeah, what we're doing is we're linking this navbar here is the same thing as this navbar right here. So these are connected like that. And then this hashtag, we're using that to connect in because we use ID over here.
So then by using ID, if you were to make another row, you know, in future, it's not just going to apply these same rules to all the rows, just this one row named navbar.
You hit the nail on the head. Yes.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay. Thank you.
Max,
Yes.
every time I try to just close a row without like ending it with a backslash, it automatically does that for me, and then I have to go back and erase it. How do I not do that?
Okay, so when you're in a div, when I open a new div and I do my class equals row, as soon as I put in my closing tag, don't fight it. That closing tag is supposed to be there. It's closing the row that I just created.
I
So
see.
if you hit enter on that, then it will move your closing div down and get your indentation right on the next line.
Okay, thank you.
That's a very common thing of you're like, this is so annoying, stop doing that. And then you realize that it is trying to help you.
No, it's not.
My only problem with the auto stuff that it does when trying to help me is I never know like how to go off and space it properly.
Yeah, you get good at saying, hey, the opening div and the closing div are supposed to line up. And if you do that auto closing one, as long as your cursor is centered between the two of them, when you hit enter, it will also do the right indentation for you, not only making this one line up, but also going a level deeper in here. So it is, I find it hard to close to code without them, but you know, it is kind of personal preference. Okay, any last questions before we roll forward here? Okay, so now I'm going to move on to our next section. That is our links. So this is meant to be like a news website, right? So we've got top stories, news, sports, and life. And the idea there is that you could click on one of them. And then this orange bar is kind of showing us what section is currently active. Obviously, we're not building out an entire news website here. This is just to get us a little bit more practice with our CSS, understanding the HTML, all of that fun stuff. So I'm going to go back to our VS Code. And I'm going to say, okay, where do I want my next row to start? Well, this row is where I open it. If I click that div, it's going to highlight that closing div there. So this is the end of my nav bar row. That means if I open a new div class row here, I'm going to preemptively put something on this like links bar and get my div inside there and my indentation right. From there, I want to get my links showing up. But in general, it's not a good idea to use a row unless you put it inside a col. So even if that's a col 12, that's okay. We're going to do a col 12 in here. And then I want all of my links to show up next to each other. So the problem that I run into, don't follow along with me for this code just for 1 second. If I put all of these in divs and I said top stories and div sports, I'm going to look at them. Divs always go down the page, right? By default, unless there's a column on it, it's going to push everything down. We don't want it to push things down. We want them all in line with each other. Well, p tags do the same thing. They just start a new line every time we use a p tag. So instead, we're going to use a span tag. And a span tag is just like a paragraph tag, except it's in line. Now you guys can resume following along with me. So if we put all of our spans in here, and don't type like an idiot, news, sports, and life. Now they all kind of show up next to each other. Okay, that's cool, but we want them in the center. So we go back to our code and we say, hey, on this col 12, we are going to center those links. So I come back over here. Okay, now they're nice and centered, but they're like all the way up at the top. So I say, all right, I got my ID here for my links bar. That's what I want to target. That's what I want to style. So I come over here to my links bar and I say, hey, I'm going to put some padding on the top of that. 10 px. Come over here. All right, that's nice little breathing room, but the links are right next to each other. I want to spread those out a little bit. So what I can do is in my links bar, I can target all the span tags. This span is going to target only spans that are inside of my links bar. Not a comma here, just a space. Now I'm going to come down here and say I would like some margin on the left of my links to be 10px and some margin on the right of my links to also be 10px. So I come over here and now my links are nice and spread apart. Don't worry, a break's coming up soon. The last thing I'm going to do is I have a nice little gray line at the bottom there. Now we could use an HR, that horizontal rule, to spread things out, but because we're getting practice with our CSS, what if we just do a border on the bottom of it? That's 1px solid, and we've been doing very bright colors, you know, reds and blues and that kind of stuff, but we're going to make this a light gray. So I come over here. There's my little light gray line, but it's right up against the bottom and it feels like it's off centered, right? It feels like this should be further down. Well, if I come over here, I'm seeing I've got padding on the top, but I don't have any of my padding on the bottom. And why do we need to use padding here instead of margin? We need to use padding because padding is what's inside the box. And then we've got our border line, and then we've got our margin. So we've got our top stories, our news, our sports, our life, and our little gray line across the bottom. Pausing there in case anyone has questions or needs to catch up. And I'm relaunching the poll just to see where you guys are at. Remember, don't vote in the poll if you're still working on it. That's okay.
It's funny by wording by wording it as padding and then now looking at the links a different way. It's almost like they're little packages. Like, wow.
Can you just show me how yours is supposed to look?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't see my writing.
What do you mean you're writing?
Like my top stories, news, sports, life. I don't see that on mine.
Do you have the span tags over here?
Yep.
Go ahead and share your screen.
Sorry.
Highlight mine.
I don't know what I did wrong.
What's that red? What did I circle in red? Oh, go back to yours.
Would you what?
See what I circled in red?
No, I don't. What exactly am I looking at?
Look at the name of the file that you have open on the left. You see news.html?
Yeah.
See that black dot?
Oh, I didn't save that. Okay, so, but mine looks like this now.
Okay. So let me see your code. You've got a capital B here and a lowercase b here.
Okay. Can you move your cursor? Okay, sorry. There you go. Okay. And it looks like this now, so.
You're all caught up.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right, so I'm embarrassed to ask this, but I still need to practice getting the live share up because I'm just following everything in Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the trick to the live share is you're tempted to click the link, and sometimes clicking the link works, but I find the best way to do it is if you go File, New Window.
File, new window.
Over on the left, go to the live share. Then scroll down and get the join button.
See, it's doing that same thing where it wants me to sign in. It just
So
didn't-
in the bottom right, you should be able to say continue anonymously.
but it didn't even offer that to me.
So do you have a pop-up up here that's asking for the link?
Yes.
Okay, that's where you want to paste in the link from Slack.
Okay.
So it's not that it's waiting for you to sign in, it's waiting for you to tell it what session to join.
That's horribly loud. I'm so sorry.
So if you paste that in and hit enter,
Pasted, enter, nothing.
so now in the bottom right, do you have something that says continue anonymously?
No, it's still asking me to starting collaboration session signed out and just keeps thinking.
What's it say up at the top?
At the top, I put the link, but when I hit enter, nothing happens.
Okay, share your screen.
Let's see what happens if I close that one. Okay. Let me find the right one. I think this is the right one.
Okay, this is in your browser. So you want to close out of this. I'm looking at Safari with your W3. Yeah. Well, you just close the tab if you want. But when you share your screen, try and share either desktop 1 or desktop 2 so I can see everything that's on the monitor.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so over on the left, click on the live share icon. Oh, the live share all the way over, wrong live share. This live share icon right here. Okay, now click on join here.
Oh, that's the problem.
Then continue as anonymous there.
Mm.
Enter up here for your name.
Mhm.
And then paste the link. Command V.
It looks like it's already there. No?
That's probably yesterday's. Oh, maybe it's the right one. Okay, enter. Okay, now you're into my live share.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Artrell, go ahead.
Just want to make sure that I'm up to speed.
Sure.
All right.
You are all caught up.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. Waiting for one more person to vote in the poll, and then we will keep going here. I only want to add one more piece of styling here, and then we'll call it a night. We'll review terms, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Anyone else need help before we roll forward? Okay.
Wait a minute.
Yep.
Oh. Can you mute yours, babe? How do we, do we like use these elements to put inside Java to make it interactable? Is that what we're doing here? Is like separating it into different sections that we can use to interact with later on?
So not necessarily. First of all, we learn JavaScript, not Java. So be careful on those two separate languages. The JavaScript we can make interactive using these IDs and columns and all of that kind of stuff. But we can use HTML all on its own, HTML and CSS, without needing JavaScript, right? So if you go load a new site, say, I don't know, hypothetically Syracuse.com, you could see that that HTML is going to be pretty close to the HTML that we're using here. So you can build entire websites that are not interactive and still very functional, right? So we can use A tags to make it so that you can link to a particular news story, or we can use regular HTML without JavaScript, but that's not to say that we can't use JavaScript to make things interactive. So we're going to keep building websites out. We're going to build a couple different projects using our divs and our classes and our CSS. And then right when you guys are feeling comfortable with it and feel like you're really getting it, then we move on to JavaScript and start building JavaScript projects as well. Okay, so I've got one last thing that I want to code out, and then we'll call it a night. So I've got this in my preview, my mockup. I got that orange bar showing up, right? And that orange bar is kind of showing me that I'm in the top stories section right now. We're not actually going to code it out to be interactive, but I want to get that to show up. So I come over here, and if I target all of my spans and just add a border on it of 1px solid red, I'm going to get them around all of them. Well, I don't want them around all of them. I only want them around one. So I'm going to take this border out, and I'm going to add an ID to my top stories called active link. I then come over to my CSS. I'm going to target my active link. And now if I put a border around that, 1px solid red, I'm going to be able to see that red around just the one span that I want. But I don't really want a border around the whole thing. I only want a border around the bottom of it. And I want that to be a little bit chunkier. So I'm going to make it 5px, and I'm going to make it orange. (8:15 at night). I can no longer spell orange, apparently. Kind of Syracusean am I? Okay, come over here. And my top stories is there. And that's kind of okay. But if we look at the mockup, we see that it's like anchored at that bottom. And that's really nice, right? That gives it that, hey, it's kind of all part of the links bar. So to fix that, I want to push the border down, but I want the words to stay exactly where they are. So because the border I want to move, I am going to use padding at the bottom. And I'm going to guess 10 pixels. So I come over here, and that's kind of okay. But if I zoom in on that, I can see that that's not quite right? It's not exactly dead on. So let's just try and go for 8 instead. And now I can see, hey, that all kind of lines up nice. I hit Command+, by the way, to zoom in on my browser. So yours isn't going to be this big. It should be something like this size, but I just use zoom in a lot in order to make it easier for you guys to see kind of what it's supposed to look like. So I come back over here. I'm almost there. This also is a nice bold font, right, for that active section. So I'm going to go back to my VS Code. I'm going to add a font weight on here, and I'm going to say that's bold. So I save, I come back over here. Got a nice font weight on that. If I zoom back out, all of that looks good. And to just prove the idea, I can take this ID and move it to another section, and my orange bar will move with it.
Great.
Give you guys 3 minutes to catch up, and then we will go into terms and call it a night. Artrell, go ahead.
So quick question, if we wanted to make it interactive, would we have to make it fluid or something like that?
No, so we could add like A tags to that and make that section interactive. So like,
Okay.
if we wanted to, we could say like, hey, we're going to have an Ahref in here that goes to google.com.
Okay.
Right. And we close our A tag out. And now when we click on top stories, it would take us to Google.
Gotcha.
So that's one way to make it interactive.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem.
So just to understand, so for the so whatever you have for the CSS style, with the hashtag, you would use ID.
Correct.
So instead of that hashtag, you'd use ID, and you could place that really pretty much anywhere that you want with those properties and attached to it.
Correct. Yep, this is called a selector over here because it's selecting a piece of our HTML over here to apply these styles between the curly braces to it.
Can you just point where the selector was? I didn't see it.
Oh,
I'm
sorry. The selector is this part up here, what comes
Okay.
before the curly brace.
Gotcha.
So selectors can be IDs like this
Mhm.
one. They can
Or-
be elements, right, where we don't use a period or an ID. That
Mhm.
means that a period or a hashtag, that means we're selecting the element itself, the span.
Okay.
Or they can be classes, which we actually don't have any of them in here. But if we wanted to affect every row on the page and
Mhm.
put a margin top of 50 pixels on it, that's going to really screw up what our site looks like. But selectors can select multiple things, right? So we got 50 pixels at the top here, 50 pixels at the top here. That's what this is. This is a selector, just like this is a selector, and this whole thing is a selector. It's just basically telling the CSS what we want to apply those styles to.
Gotcha. It's all making a little more sense.
Lots of practice. You guys may have noticed there wasn't any pre-reading this week. That's okay. I think I'm going to cancel the quiz for this week as well. It's a short week and we're just getting practice with this, right? Lots more projects to go after this one. But this is all that project-based learning, right? I know it's a lot. Sometimes you got to catch up after class, but letting it all sink in, sometimes it takes all layers of an onion, right? It takes a little while for that marinade to soak in and get to all those different layers. So don't want you to feel completely lost in class, but hopefully it's kind of making sense. You're starting to make those connections. You're seeing the lines connecting everything together. You're seeing this active link here is tying to this active link right here, right? You're starting to see, oh, this Bootstrap is just CSS. So when I use things like the container fluid and the row and the column, all three of these are coming right from my Bootstrap up here. Right, we're starting to recognize, hey, this row is here, and this, because it's indented a level, that means it's inside this container fluid here. But each one of these columns here, here, and here are all part of this row inside here.
Mhm. Okay. So I'm mostly caught up, but there's
Okay.
a couple things that aren't right.
Sure.
I'd love your help with that.
If you don't mind, let's do a terms review just to capture any of that, and then I'll stay on and help anyone who's stuck.
Thank you.
Okay, let me switch over to the outline. Were there any terms or concepts used tonight that we would like to capture? Agonza, do you have one?
Yes. So there were actually a couple that I wrote down.
Go for it.
So the shortcuts to start of the HTML.
Emmet, abbreviations, HTML template, shortcut. In a .html file, in an empty HTML file. Pull this out a little bit. Putting an exclamation point and hitting the enter button will drop in the starter template for an HTML file.
And that's all meta, right?
That includes the meta tags, but it also includes the head and the body and the HTML and the doc type.
So another one was refactor and dry.
Refactor and dry. Don't repeat yourself. Another one that I absolutely live by. Keep it simple, stupid. There are several variations of that last S. I will let you guys put in whatever you would like there. And then silly, yes. Totally not the direction I was headed with that, but yes. And then refactor is after completing a working version of your code, going back to clean up the code, whether that's making it more efficient, leaving comments, or drying out your code. So when we dry out our code, we just find things that are repeated and try and remove those repeated things to make it a little bit easier to read and understand.
Cool.
Anyone else have terms that we want to capture for tonight?
Span.
What's that?
Span.
Span.
S-P-A-N.
Yeah. An inline HTML element used for placing content next to each other while still being individually styled using a CSS selector.
Did you define CSS selector?
Sure. CSS selector. Using HTML elements, IDs, and or class names. You can determine which determine what the following styles are going to apply to. But at any point you don't agree with my definition or think you have a better one, always feel free to interrupt me because I do these on the fly. And contrary to popular belief, I am sometimes wrong. I still think it's so funny at the end of cohort 3. They said, do you actually type that fast or do you have this all like pre-programmed to just drop in?
And
No, it's not pre-programmed. I do this live on the fly. If you see all my typos, you know that that I am human. This is not a robot entering code.
I am not a robot.
It's just 10 years of experience.
Yes. Practice, practice, practice. Any other terms for tonight?
Char set was one that I noticed.
Char
Yeah,
set,
gone over
sure,
that
or char
previously.
set. Character set. The encoding the computer / browser uses to convert your letters into binary code allows us to use non-traditional characters in our code like emoji.
To go off of that, could you also define meta?
Meta used in the head tag of the browser to give it more information about the following contents of our site and how it should be handled. Anything else? Proud of myself. I ended 10 minutes early tonight. We actually got to terms. Okay, so what to look forward to tomorrow is we're going to continue building out our new site. We're going to get our 3 columns down here working. We're going to practice with our image tags and making sure our images show up. We're going to practice with a site called Unsplashed, which is how we are going to get our copyright-free images. And then we are finally going to learn how to use Google Fonts to add a couple styling touches to our site. So that's what's coming down the pipeline. No homework tonight. Just make sure this is all kind of sinking in. I lied. One piece of homework tonight. If you have not filled out the AEI poll yet, the week 3 poll, go ahead and fill that out for me. It should only take you 5 to 10 minutes. It's linked in Canvas and in tonight's outline. You don't have to turn anything in on Canvas. Once you submit the form, you're good to go there. And then Ariel is working on catching up on grading. So we should have your weekend homework assignments and stuff like that graded shortly. That's all I got. I will stick around and help anyone catch up who needs it, but you guys are free to go for the evening.
Just a quick question. Will we have homework, obviously for this week? Will it be available on Thursday or will it be available on Wednesday? Since we don't have any more class sessions.
Let's say late Thursday morning, it will be available.
Okay, that works.
I want to see how far we get. I have to go back into cohort 3 and like cherry pick out what homework assignment I want you guys to do this weekend.
Mhm.
I may actually take back the optional homework assignment for the form and make that your homework assignment for this weekend. So let me think on that and get back to you.
Okay, cool. Sounds great. Thank you.
No problem.
Gotta work that more. That was good.
Jennifer, do you want to share your screen and we can dive in? And anyone else who needs help, go ahead and raise your hand. Otherwise, get out of here.
You just need to see the ending screen.
Sure. That would require me to be able to find the ending screen.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Can you keep it up for a second?
Oh,
Shoot,
my bad.
I didn't see it fast enough. Okay, blue, white, orange underline. Okay, almost.
Do you want to share your screen and then Naija, I'll come to you next.
Yes, thank you. Let's see here. Desktop 1. All right, got that.
Okay. So first thing I noticed right off the bat is that blue, right? That blue shouldn't be coming all the way down. So if you give me remote control, what that says to me is that your top stories bar and all of this stuff is still part of your nav bar up here. But the first thing I noticed right off the bat is your indentation is wrong, and that's what's making it harder to detect that where the row ends and closes and all of that stuff.
Okay.
So we've got our column in here, and our row hasn't closed out yet, and it's not supposed to close out yet, right? Because this column and this column are all part of this row.
Right.
So what we do is we indent over like this because we're inside of that row. Same for here. That column only goes one over because it's not in this column, it's next to this column. So we indent over, and then finally, we've got our sign in, and that is all part of this top column. Now you have end navbar row here, but this isn't the end of the navbar row. This is the end of your third column.
So I put that comment in the wrong spot.
So what we want to do is we want to close out our row here. Now, because all of this is lining up, we can see that this tag and this tag are on the same level. So we must have closed out that row properly. Now, the good news is your indentation here is right, here is right, here is right. That means we can easily line this div up with this div up with this div, and even this div up with this div, and see that we don't have any stragglers.
I'm proud to say that before I got on here, I was able to correct a couple of things.
So you are all caught up. Believe it or not, that's all it took, was making sure that we had closed out this div before we started this div.
Nice. And that little gray line is this links bar border bottom.
You got it.
Gray.
Yep.
Ooh, feels good when you get it. Thank you.
No problem. Awesome work. You caught up well. And plug in your laptop. I'm gonna have a requirement. You can't join in class unless you have like a 50% battery.
I know. I had to move so my wife could take a test upstairs.
No problem. Naisha, go ahead.
Mine don't look as quite like yours. I'm gonna have to share my screen, but I'm trying to figure out how. 1 second. Can you see?
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Yep, you're good. Share the right one. Okay, so let's take a look at your HTML to get started. Right off the bat, all of this looks good. Let's switch over to your style.css. And yep, it's exactly the problem that I thought. So if we look at this, you see we got a capital B right here. But if you switch back to your HTML for me, you've got a lowercase b right there.
So just change that to uppercase?
Yep.
Okay.
Your screen share freeze? Oh, maybe we lost you. She got it working. Was like, that's it. I'm out.
Have a good night, Max.
See ya. Kalai, go ahead. Let me stop this screen share. Okay, there you go.
So I got everything. Everything is in the screen except I didn't get any of the CSS features in it. So,
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, if you want, you can kind of just copy and paste the CSS from my live share to see if it gets everything looking right, and then you can go back, delete out my CSS and practice on that.
Do you want me to share the screen?
Sure, if you want to.
Yeah. That's fine. Can you?
Thank you, Max. Thank you, Mel.
Yeah.
Have a good night, guys.
No problem.
Have a good night, everyone.
Can you see my screen, Max?
I can see the mock-up in preview.
Oh. Can you see me?
Now I
me?
can, yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
I-
so all of that looks good. And you've got all yours. Oh, okay, here's your problem. You've got a pound sign at the beginning of your file name. So if you open up the file browser here and just right click on your style.css here and hit rename, right click, either 2-finger tap on the trackpad and then go down to rename. Just take out that beginning pound sign there or hashtag and hit enter or click off, either one. Okay, now go back to your browser and see what it looks like.
Sorry, I got disconnected.
It's okay. You froze up and I thought you just like mic dropped. It's all working, I'm out. Clyde, is that?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay.
I think you can see the screen now.
I can only see your code. The only thing that I'll say is if it's not perfectly right, make sure that your casing is consistent, because
sure.
you've got a capital L here and a lowercase b, and then you got a lowercase L and b on the second one.
Okay,
So
sure.
if you switch back to your news.html, just see what that ID is and then make it consistent here, and you'll be all caught up.
Sure, thank you.
Oh, and you probably want to take out this row margin top down at the bottom. That was just for an example, but you want to take that out and the spacing will go back to normal.
Sure, yeah.
Cool. Naisha, do you still need help?
Yeah, I think the only part I needed help with was like the little orange line
Yeah.
underneath the word. Let me share my screen again. Let me
Yes,
see.
please.
Desktop one. Get it done.
Okay, so you've got your ID active link, which is good. That's all set up. So let's go to your style.css and look at what that looks like. And same exact problem. You need a capital L in active link.
Okay.
And save and take a look.
Oh yeah, there you go.
We're all caught up. Good work.
Thank you.
Archerel, need anything?
No, I think I'm all set. I'm just listening to make sure, for question, if something comes up, I know how to handle it.
Yeah, you are more than welcome to do that. Kalai, you need anything help? before
Can
we
you
head out?
just put the code for today's in the Slack?
Yes,
So, yeah,
yes.
thank you. Night, Max. Thank you.
No problem. You guys have an awesome evening. I will see you tomorrow.
Good night, Max.